The general struck her in the jaw in front of an entire hangar full of American troops, expecting compliance, expecting fear, expecting to prove a point about strength. But in less than 2 seconds, he would learn that the quiet woman he had just humiliated was something far more dangerous than anything he had ever commanded, and that some lessons don't come with warnings, they come with consequences. The heat inside the forward operating base training hangar clung to the air like a second skin, thick with dust, sweat, and tension as rows of Marines, sailors, and special operations personnel stood loosely gathered around a worn mat that had seen more truth than most briefing rooms ever would. Their conversations low and cautious as word spread that Brigadier General Marcus Hale had arrived unannounced, a man whose reputation traveled faster than any official order, known across multiple commands, not just for his decorated service record, but for a leadership style that bordered on ruthless. A man who believed deeply that pressure revealed weakness, and that weakness had no place in his military. And today, it seemed, he had decided to make an example out of someone. At the center of the mat stood Petty Officer Erin Cole, her posture relaxed but balanced, her uniform standard issue, sleeves rolled. Nothing about her outwardly remarkable except perhaps the stillness. The kind of stillness that didn't come from uncertainty, but from control. The kind that made experienced operators in the room subtly shift their attention without fully understanding why, while the less experienced dismissed her entirely as just another support role caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, an assumption that would soon prove costly. Hale paced slowly in front of the formation, his boots striking the concrete with deliberate weight as he scanned the room, his sharp eyes landing on Cole with immediate disapproval, not because of anything she had done, but because of what she represented in his mind, a narrative he had already decided was true before stepping foot inside the hangar. And when he finally spoke, his voice cut clean through the low hum of the room. "This is your instructor?" he asked, not really seeking an answer, his tone already carrying judgment as a few uneasy glances passed between the assembled personnel, no one eager to step forward, no one willing to contradict him, because rank still held gravity, even when it was wrong. Cole didn't respond. She didn't shift. She didn't acknowledge the challenge in his voice, and that silence, more than anything, irritated him, because it denied him the reaction he expected, the subtle submission that reinforced authority, and instead presented him with something far more uncomfortable: indifference. "I've seen this trend," Hale continued, turning slightly so his voice carried to everyone present, transforming the moment into a performance. Standards lowered in the name of inclusion. Optics prioritized over effectiveness. And when that happens, people get hurt. A few nods appeared in the crowd, hesitant, uncertain, more aligned with his rank than his reasoning, while others remained still, watching carefully, sensing that something about this situation wasn't as simple as it appeared. Cole remained exactly where she was, her breathing steady, her gaze level, not confrontational, not submissive, simply present, and to those paying close enough attention, there was something precise about the way she held herself, like every inch of her posture had been measured and refined through repetition far beyond standard training. Hale stepped onto the mat without invitation, closing the distance between them, his presence imposing, his authority unquestioned, at least on the surface. "What's your specialty, Petty Officer?" he asked, though his tone suggested he had already decided the answer didn't matter. "Logistics? Communications?" Cole met his eyes briefly. "Close quarters combat, sir." There was no emphasis, no attempt to impress, just a statement, delivered as plainly as possible, and for a fraction of a second, something flickered across Hale's expression: amusement, disbelief, maybe even irritation, but it vanished just as quickly. "Is that right?" he said, stepping closer, now fully committed to the demonstration he was constructing in his mind. "Then let's see it." The air shifted. The room tightened. Those with experience began to recognize the direction this was heading, but the momentum of rank and ego had already taken hold, and no one stepped in. "Defend yourself," Hale said, his voice firm, expectant. Cole didn't move. She didn't raise her hands. She didn't adopt a stance. She simply stood there, calm, grounded, waiting, and in that moment, Hale made the mistake that would define everything that followed. He interpreted her stillness as hesitation, as weakness, as confirmation of every assumption he had walked in with. And without another word, his hand came up in a cross in a sharp, controlled strike that was meant to shock, to dominate, to establish hierarchy in the most physical way possible. The crack of impact echoed through the hangar, louder than it should have been, sharper than anyone expected, and the reaction was immediate. Silence, absolute and complete, as every person in the room understood that a line had just been crossed, not blurred, not tested, but shattered outright. Cole's head turned slightly with the force, just enough to absorb the strike, her body shifting minimally, efficiently, like something built to handle impact without waste, and then she returned her gaze to him. No anger, no fear, no reaction that matched what everyone else was feeling. Just focus, cold, precise, and suddenly impossible to ignore. Hale held his ground, his posture unchanged, as if expecting the moment to resolve in his favor, as if expecting her to step back, to falter, to prove him right. But what he didn't understand, what no one in that room fully understood yet, was that he had just initiated something he no longer controlled, because her silence had never been submission, her stillness had never been hesitation, and the woman standing in front of him was not a representation of lowered standards, but the embodiment of a level of training and experience that operated far outside the assumptions he had built his authority on. And in that suspended second, just before everything changed, the entire room felt it. That subtle, almost invisible shift in balance, like the moment before a storm breaks, when the air itself seems to hold its breath. The general would later struggle to pinpoint the exact moment he lost control, because from his perspective it felt instantaneous, but to everyone watching, it was a sequence so precise it might as well have been inevitable. For a brief second after the strike, the hangar remained frozen, the echo still lingering as Brigadier General Hale stood firm, expecting compliance, expecting the moment to resolve in his favor, but Petty Officer Erin Cole didn't react the way he had planned. She didn't step back, didn't raise her hands, didn't even touch her jaw. Instead, she made a subtle adjustment, a slight shift of weight that grounded her stance, aligning her body with quiet efficiency, like something practiced far beyond standard training. Hill misread it immediately. To him, it looked like hesitation turning into defiance, and his ego pushed him forward, demanding he reassert control. So he reached out, grabbing her arm in a firm, authoritative grip meant to dominate the exchange in front of the watching crowd. That was when everything unraveled. The moment his hand closed around her wrist, Cole moved. Not with force, not with visible aggression, but with precision so sharp it felt almost invisible, her wrist rotating within his grip, her fingers applying just enough pressure to exploit the weakest point in his hold, and suddenly his control was gone. Before he could process it, her other hand struck, not wildly, not with power, but directly into a nerve cluster below his collarbone, a calculated disruption that sent immediate weakness through his arm, his strength faltering as confusion replaced certainty on his face. The room didn't react. They couldn't, because she was already inside his reach, stepping forward instead of back, collapsing the distance that gave him advantage, her movement controlled, efficient, and impossibly fast. Hale tried to recover, his instincts kicking in, but he was already behind the moment, already reacting to something that had already passed, and then his balance disappeared. Cole pivoted smoothly, using his forward motion against him, her hip aligning beneath his center of gravity, redirecting his weight with minimal effort, and in an instant, the general, larger, heavier, stronger, was no longer standing. He hit the mat hard, the impact knocking the breath from his lungs, a sharp, involuntary sound cutting through the silence. But even that wasn't the end of it. Before he could react, before he could even fully register the fall, she followed through, her movement continuous, her knee planting firmly on his chest, her weight distributed with perfect control, her forearm pressing across his throat, not crushing, but limiting, asserting dominance without excess force. His free arm tried to push, to create space, but she trapped it effortlessly, turning his own movement into another disadvantage, locking him in place with technique rather than strength. The entire exchange, from his grab to complete immobilization, took less than 2 seconds. 2 seconds to dismantle everything he thought gave him the upper hand. The hangar fell into a deeper silence, Not just shock now, but realization, as every person present understood they had just witnessed something far beyond standard training. Hale lay pinned, his chest rising unevenly as he tried to breathe, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. And above him, Cole remained calm, her expression unchanged, her breathing steady, as if none of it had required effort. She looked down at him, her voice quiet, controlled, and completely devoid of emotion. "You're compromised." The words landed heavier than the takedown. A senior commander finally stepped forward, breaking the moment. "Stand down." Cole released instantly, stepping back with the same efficiency she had shown throughout, returning to a neutral stance, as if nothing had happened. Hale rolled onto his side, pulling in air, his pride taking the greater blow. And as he pushed himself up, one thing became painfully clear, not just to him, but to everyone in that room. This hadn't been luck. It had been mastery, and the quiet woman he had just tried to break had been in control the entire time. The hangar didn't return to normal after that. It couldn't, because something fundamental had shifted, not just in the room, but in the way everyone present understood strength, authority, and consequence. Brigadier General Hale stood slowly, his composure rebuilt on the surface, but fractured underneath, his eyes no longer scanning the room with confidence, but fixed on Petty Officer Aaron Cole with something far rarer, recognition. No one spoke as a secure tablet was handed to him, the kind reserved for information most people in that hangar would never be cleared to see, and as he read, the silence deepened. His expression changed in stages: certainty, confusion, then something heavier, understanding. He lowered the tablet slowly, exhaling through his nose before looking back at her, really looking this time, not at her rank, not at her appearance, but at what he had completely failed to see. "Tier 1 operator," he said under his breath, the words carrying just enough for those nearby to hear, sending a quiet ripple through the room. He stepped toward her, not with authority now, but with intention, stopping just short as the weight of his earlier actions settled fully into place. "I made an assumption," he said, his voice lower, controlled, stripped of the edge it carried before. Cole met his gaze without hesitation. "Yes, sir." No emotion, no judgment, just fact. That made it land harder. Hale gave a single nod, the kind exchanged between professionals, not ranks, before turning back to the room. "Let this be clear," he said, his voice firm again, but different now, tempered. "Strength is not size. Authority is not infallibility. And assumptions," he paused briefly, "will get you hurt." No one moved. No one needed to. The lesson had already been delivered. Cole picked up her gear without ceremony, without acknowledgement of the attention now surrounding her, and started toward the exit as if the entire incident had been nothing more than routine. A young Marine, still trying to process what he had witnessed, took a hesitant step forward. "Ma'am, how did you do that?" She paused briefly, glancing back just enough to answer. "He relied on what he thought was true," she said calmly. "I relied on what works." Then she walked out, leaving behind a room full of warriors who would remember that moment far longer than any order, because what happened on that mat wasn't just a demonstration. It was a correction, one delivered without anger, without ego, and without a single wasted movement.